In a 2011 study at Purdue University, 200 students were split into two groups to learn the same science material. One group read it over and over. The other group read it once, then closed the book and tried to remember it. A week later, the second group crushed the first, by 50%. Same material, same time, one difference. And if you're over 50, that single difference is the reason names slip away at parties, why you walk into a room and forget why, and why you believe your memory is failing when it simply isn't. Here's the truth. Your memory is not broken. It's being used backwards. Most people over 50 have been taught one method their entire lives. Look at something. Look at it again. Repeat until it sticks. That's how school taught you. That's how you studied for tests. That's how you try to remember a phone number or a grocery list right now. And it feels productive. Reading feels like learning. It's smooth. It's comfortable. Your eyes glide across familiar words and your brain says, yes, I know this. But that feeling is a lie. Cognitive scientists have a name for it. They call it the fluency illusion. The easier something feels to read, the more your brain assumes it has learned it, and the less it actually retains. Robert Bjork, a memory researcher at UCLA who has studied this for over 40 years, calls the whole idea desirable difficulty. His finding is blunt. Learning that feels hard sticks. Learning that feels easy vanishes. So the problem was never your age. The problem is that the comfortable method was always the weak one, and after 50, a weak method simply can't fight the natural changes in how your brain files information. You've been paddling harder in a boat with a hole in it. Nobody handed you a bucket. But the real question is why? Why does trying to remember something work dramatically better than reading it again? The answer sits deep inside how your brain physically stores a memory, and once you understand the mechanism, you'll never study or memorize anything the same way again. Let's start with what a memory actually is, because almost nobody explains this correctly. Reading about it, you might picture a memory as a file in a cabinet. You write it once, you store it, and later you open the drawer to find it. That picture is wrong, and that wrong picture is exactly why people over 50 panic when a name won't come. A memory is not a stored object, it's a pathway. Think of it like a trail through tall grass in a field. The first time you walk across, you leave a faint line, barely visible. Rain could erase it overnight. If you want that trail to last, you have to walk it again. But here's the part nobody mentions. You don't strengthen the trail by looking at it. You strengthen it by walking it. And in your brain, walking the trail means pulling the memory out, not pushing it in. When you read something again, you're standing at the edge of the field, staring at the grass. Your brain recognizes the path. Oh yes, that one. But recognition is not retrieval. When you close the book and force yourself to remember, your brain has to physically walk the trail from start to finish, searching, stumbling, and finally arriving. That act of walking, the effort, the struggle, the search, is what deepens the groove. Neuroscientists call this retrieval practice, and it is the single most powerful learning tool ever measured. Here's the mechanism at the cellular level. Every time you successfully retrieve a memory, the connections between the neurons that hold it get physically stronger. The scientific term is long-term potentiation. In plain English, neurons that fire together, wire together. When your brain drags a fact out of storage, the effort thickens the biological wiring that holds it, like a muscle growing after resistance. Reading is lifting a 1-pound weight. Retrieval is lifting 40. Guess which one builds strength? And this matters far more after 50 than it ever did at 20. Here's why. As your brain ages, the change isn't that memories disappear. It's that the retrieval roads get slower and less traveled. The information is still in there. The trail exists. But the grass has grown back over it, because you stopped walking it. Researchers at the University of Edinburgh, tracking the same group of people from age 11 into their 70s in the famous Lothian birth cohort studies, found that the biggest predictor of who kept their sharpness wasn't raw intelligence. It was how actively they kept using and challenging their minds. So when you forget a name and think, my memory is going, what's really happening is that the road to that name has gotten quiet, not gone. Quiet. And retrieval practice is how you widen that road again. Let me make this concrete. Say you meet a man named Robert at a family gathering. The old way, you hear Robert, you nod, you shake his hand, and 30 seconds later it's gone. Why? Because you never walked the trail. You heard the name, which is input, and then you did nothing. No retrieval, no effort. The grass grew back before you left the room. Now the retrieval way. You hear Robert. 3 seconds later, in your own head, you pull it back. Robert. You wait 10 more seconds, talking to him, and pull it again. Robert. A minute later, silently, one more time. Robert. You just walked that trail 3 times. You didn't read his name off a card. You retrieved it from nothing, which is exactly the effort that carves it in. That's the entire trick in miniature, and I'll show you how to scale it up to remember almost anything. But this is only half the story. Because retrieval alone, done at the wrong time, still leaks. What happens next is the part that separates people who remember for a day from people who remember for a lifetime. If reading again is the weak method, and retrieval is the strong one, then the timing of your retrieval is the multiplier. And this is where your brain does something strange, almost counterintuitive, that most people get completely wrong. Here's the empathy moment first. If you've ever crammed for something, a speech, a name list, a set of instructions, and felt like you had it cold that night, only to watch it evaporate by morning, that wasn't a personal failure. That was biology doing exactly what it's designed to do. Your brain is not built to keep everything. It's built to forget aggressively, on purpose, to protect you from drowning in useless detail. In the 1880s, a German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus did something nobody had done before. He tested his own memory, over and over, for years, and mapped how fast we forget. He called it the forgetting curve, and it's brutal. Within 1 hour, you lose more than half of new information. Within a day, up to 70% is gone. His work is over 130 years old, and it has held up in study after study since. But Ebbinghaus found something else, and this is the gold. Every time you review information right as you're about to forget it, the forgetting slows down, the curve flattens. The first time, you might forget in a day. Review it then, and the memory lasts 3 days. Review it again at 3 days, and it lasts a week. Then 2 weeks. Then a month. Then a year. Each retrieval, timed at the edge of forgetting, doesn't just reset the memory. It makes the memory more durable than before. This is called spaced repetition. And here's the analogy that makes it click. Picture watering a plant. If you dump a gallon of water on it all at once, most of it runs off and the plant barely drinks. But if you give it a little water, wait until the soil is nearly dry, then water again, the roots grow deep, searching for moisture between waterings. Your memory works the same way. The dry spell, the gap where you almost forget, is not wasted time. That gap is when the roots grow. Cramming is the gallon dumped at once. Spaced retrieval is the deep watering. And this is why people who study for 8 hours the night before remember almost nothing a week later, while someone who spends 15 minutes a day for a week remembers it for months. Same total time. Wildly different results. The difference is the gap. The difference is letting yourself almost forget, then pulling it back. Now here's why this matters so much for you specifically. After 50, that forgetting curve gets a little steeper at the start. New information fades slightly faster in the first hours. Some researchers dispute exactly how much, and the research is still evolving on this, but the practical takeaway is clear. Which means the old method of one review, then nothing, fails harder for you than it did when you were young. But, and this is the beautiful part, spaced retrieval works just as well at 70 as it does at 20. The mechanism doesn't age. A 2013 review in the journal Psychological Science in the Public Interest, examining hundreds of studies, ranked spaced practice and retrieval practice as the 2 most effective learning techniques ever tested, across every age group. If this is making sense, and you want the third piece, the actual step-by-step method to put retrieval and spacing together so you can remember names, lists, facts, anything, subscribe now, because that part is coming in just a few minutes, and it's the piece that changes everything. It's the exact system I use, and it takes 15 minutes a day. So you've got retrieval, which is walking the trail. You've got spacing, which is walking it at the right moments. But none of it holds together without understanding what your brain does with a memory in the hours after you make it, especially between the moment you learn something and the next morning. What almost nobody talks about is that the memory you make today is not finished today. It's wet cement, and the setting happens while you sleep. Here's the finding that stunned researchers. When you learn something and then sleep, your brain doesn't rest. It replays. During deep sleep, the same neurons that fired when you learned the information fire again, in the same order, sometimes faster. Scientists at the University of Arizona and elsewhere have literally recorded this in the lab, watching the brain rehearse the day's memories in the dark. Your brain is doing retrieval practice on its own, while you're unconscious, transferring the memory from the fragile short-term holding area, the hippocampus, into the deep, durable storage of the cortex. Read that again. While you sleep, your brain is walking the trails you made during the day, over and over, to carve them permanent. This is why pulling an all-nighter to remember something is one of the worst things you can do. You're skipping the exact stage where memories get locked in. And it's why, after 50, when deep sleep naturally shrinks, memory can feel weaker. Not because you can't learn, but because the cement isn't setting as hard overnight. Matthew Walker, a sleep scientist at Berkeley, has shown that the deep, slow-wave sleep that consolidates memory declines significantly with age. The learning still happens. The overnight filing just needs more help. And here's the counterintuitive fact that ties this whole thing together, the one almost nobody knows. The best time to do your final retrieval of the day is right before you sleep. Not the morning, not the afternoon. The last thing you rehearse before your head hits the pillow gets first priority in the overnight replay. Some scientists call it the recency advantage in sleep-dependent consolidation. In plain terms, whatever you feed your brain last, it chews on all night. So think about what this means. You've spent decades doing the exact opposite. You cram in the morning, run around all day, and by bedtime you've buried the new information under 100 other things. Your brain sleeps on the noise, not the signal. You gave it the wrong material to rehearse. There's one more layer, and it's the emotional glue. Memories tied to meaning, to emotion, to something you already care about, stick far harder than isolated facts. Your brain is not a filing cabinet with equal-sized drawers. It's more like a small town where everyone remembers the dramatic events and forgets the ordinary Tuesdays. A name attached to a story, a face, a feeling, that gets a big drawer. A name floating alone gets tossed. This is why you can remember exactly where you were during a major event 40 years ago, but not what you had for lunch on Monday. So the question becomes, if your brain has these three built-in mechanisms, retrieval, spacing, and sleep, plus the power of meaning, how do you actually put them together into something you can use tomorrow morning? Here is the method. It's called active recall with spaced repetition, and I'm going to give it to you in clear steps that you can start using today, whether you're memorizing a speech, learning names, studying a language, or just trying to keep your mind sharp. Step 1. When you learn something new, learn it once, properly, then close the source immediately. Book shut. Notes flipped over. Do not reread. The moment you finish reading, look away and ask yourself out loud, what did I just learn? Struggle to say it in your own words. This is the walking the trail step, and the struggle is the point. If it feels hard, it's working. This first retrieval, done within 1 minute of learning, is worth more than reading the passage 5 more times. Step 2. Write your knowledge as questions, not statements. This is critical, and almost everyone gets it wrong. Don't write the capital of France is Paris. Write, what is the capital of France on one side, Paris on the other. Questions force retrieval. Statements only allow rereading. Make a small stack of index cards. Questions on the front, answers on the back. For names, front says the face or the story, back says the name. Your whole life becomes a series of questions you answer from memory. Step 3, and this is the engine. Space your reviews on a widening schedule. Review the new cards the same day, then the next day, then 3 days later, then a week, then 2 weeks, then a month. Every time you get a card right easily, push it further out. Every time you miss one, pull it back to the start. You're always reviewing right at the edge of forgetting, which is exactly where the roots grow deepest. 15 minutes a day is plenty. This is not more work than the old way. It's less work, aimed better. Step 4. Do your final review of the day in the last 15 minutes before bed. Go through the hardest cards one last time. This hands your brain the right material to replay overnight. Then sleep at least 7 hours if your body allows it, because that's when the cement sets. Step 5. Attach meaning to anything that won't stick. If a name won't hold, build a tiny picture. Meet a rose, picture a rose. Meet a Mr. Baker, picture him in an apron pulling bread from an oven. It feels silly. It works because you're giving the memory a big drawer instead of a small one. The stranger and more vivid the image, the stronger it holds. If even one of these steps was new to you, hit the like button. It's a small thing, but it tells the algorithm to put this in front of more people over 50 who've been told their memory is just going, when the truth is nobody ever taught them how it actually works. This isn't theory. Dr. Sean Kang, a cognitive scientist who has published extensively on spaced learning, has spent years showing that these spacing schedules produce dramatic gains across ages. Medical students now use this exact system to memorize thousands of facts, using spaced repetition apps built directly on Ebbinghaus's 130-year-old curve. The tool has been sitting in the research for over a century. It just never made it to you. I'll bet most of you have experienced this without ever naming it. That time a fact just wouldn't stick no matter how many times you read it, and then one day it clicked and never left. That click was retrieval. You just did it by accident. Now you can do it on purpose. Step back and think about what this really means. For most of your life, you were handed a broken tool and told the problem was you. You read and reread. You crammed. You blamed your age when the names slipped. But the fault was never in your brain. The fault was in the method. And the method was fixable all along. Your brain at 60 or 70 is not a fading machine running out of room. It's a field full of trails, some worn deep, some grown quiet from disuse. Every trail is still walkable. Every road can be widened again. The science is unusually clear on this. The capacity to learn does not vanish with age. It just demands the right method. And now you have it. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the one thing in this video you wish someone had taught you 30 years ago? I read them, and I promise you're not the only one who feels this way. Here's what I want you to carry out of here. You were never losing your memory. You were only losing the habit of using it. Share this with someone who keeps saying they're too old to learn, because they're wrong, and this might be the thing that proves it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. What's coming next week is a method for remembering names that I've been testing for months, and it's the closest thing to a superpower I've found. Your mind was never the problem. The instructions were just missing. Now they're not.